Welcome back to the channel, guys. UFC 309 just ended in Madison Square Garden. I'm going to do my reaction and breakdown to all the fights, starting with the prelims, ending with the main event. Pretty long night, a little bit tired, so I'm going to get this one going. First fight was Eduardo Mora versus Veronica Hardy. Eduardo Mora wins by decision, landing some crispy right hands first round, gets a takedown the second round, controls the action. Third round, Veronica Hardy had a little bit more success. She just continued to circle into the power hand of Eduardo Mora. Looked like she was a little hesitant to engage just due to Mora's size. Was getting frustrated. Like I said, she kept circling into her power hand, eating shots. Starting to be a little bit more effective in the stand-up with her kicks and everything in the third round, but it was a little too late. So ended up losing that round. Still looked a little undersized. Eduardo Mora is huge for that division. So great performance, good win. So moving on, next fight, Oban Elliott versus Basil Hafez. Oban looked really good in this fight, keeping his range, sticking him with kicks to the middle, kicks to the thighs, really keeping him honest, digging him into the solar plexus area. Just really controlling the fight the entire time. And then round three lands a beautiful right hand down the pipe, follows up with ground and pound, puts Basil Hafez out, puts him out, wakes him up again, puts him out again. Kind of a late stoppage, rough to see, but great performance by Oban Elliott. So the Welsh Gangster, pretty badass nickname. So good to see from him. I think that puts him at 4-0 in the UFC. So look forward to where he goes from here. Next fight was Ramiz Brahimaj versus Mickey Gall. Thought Mickey Gall was going to have a little bit more in the stand-up department. Tended to kind of hold his head on the center line. Wasn't really moving it. Just looked a little flat-footed. Couldn't really pull the trigger. Brahimaj, first knockout of his career. Imagine that against my pick. Landed a beautiful, I think it was a right hand over the top. Put Mickey Gall on the ground. Ended up knocking his mouthpiece out once he hit the ground. Finished it by a TKO, so that's kind of the end of the road for Mickey Gall. I think that's 3 or 4 in a row. Sucks for him. Had a lot of potential, but just couldn't really ever get it to put it together. I thought he'd be a little bit better on the feet. Maybe I should have thought better because he looked decent against Basil Hafez, and I picked against Basil Hafez in the fight tonight. But Brahimaj just didn't show the greatest stand up. You could tell that he threw really hard, but you could see that he was getting exposed in kind of the grappling department whenever he'd have a step up in competition. So I thought Mickey Gall would be able to mix it up a little bit, win the grappling exchanges, and land some of those power punches, but that didn't happen. So moving on. Marcin Tybura versus Jonata Denise. So it turns out Jonata Denise has 0 ground game. Despicable performance on his part. I think he went back for a heel hook against a UFC veteran heavyweight black belt. Didn't get it. Started to throw hammer fists from his back instead of just standing back up to his feet where he has the advantage. Second round, ended up getting taken down again. Just beats all hell with elbows. Looked like he broke his nose. Blood coming out of his eyes. I don't really know what happened. I think that they said that he was on unsteady legs or something like that, but they ended up calling it. Kind of frustrating. I wish that he would have had another opportunity since, every round starts on the feet in the third round, but they called it. But he looked awful. He's just another kind of out of shape heavyweight. You'd think that he would train at least how to retain guard or maybe get up or to defend on the ground. I guess not. So awful performance. Another win by Marcin Tybura, exposing fraud checking young up and coming heavyweight. So next fight, David Onama versus Roberto Romero. David Onama taking a lot of shots, leg kicks, very beginning of that first round. Roberto Romero came to fight. Dude was not taking his chance lightly. Came out winging him, threw I think it was a right hand, dropped Onama, got on top of him. And then I think Onama ended up hurting him at the end of that round. But really good fight, back and forth. I know it's a short notice fight for Romero, but it's also a short notice opponent for David Onama. So he doesn't really have time to prepare for that opponent. But great blood and guts war. Good to see from Romero. I think he'll get another chance in the UFC But good fight on the prelims. I'm glad they got that one added into the card late notice, so it was a good fight, good scrap. Next up was Jim Miller versus Damon Jackson. Jimmy with the gilly. Jim Miller. At least we had one 40-plus-year-old look good, decent, halfway decent on this card. We'll get to that in a little bit. But Jim Miller looked good on the feet. Damon tried to grapple a little bit, was able to circle off. Damon Jackson shot kind of a lazy takedown, and Jim Miller got the arm and guillotine, made him tap almost immediately. So Jim Miller still in the game now. Damon Jackson, I think he retired, refused an interview. I'm sure he was pretty upset, but said in the lead up to this, it felt like it was kind of a last-ditch effort of a career trying to move up, tired of cutting weight, doesn't really want to, isn't really taking his career that serious anymore, and sucks for Damon Jackson. He was a good fighter, but Jim Miller wants to continue fighting. I think he said he wanted to have 5 more fights, to get some number of fights. He wanted to keep fighting, which is cool to see. I like Jim Miller. He's entertaining. He's really good. Obviously able to still compete with the top guys. Granted, Damon Jackson, he's 36, not the youngest guy in the division, but like to see Jim Miller get more fun matchups. See how many more wins he can rattle off. So next up was Marcus McGee versus Jonathan Martinez. Marcus McGee looked really good, keeping good distance, but then stepping in, landing his kicks, landing his punches, not giving Jonathan Martinez a lot of space at times to get his kick game going. And then when he was backing up, he was circling really well, had good movement. Few good leg kicks landed by Jonathan Martinez, but that's all Jonathan Martinez has is kicks. Doesn't have a lot of hands. You don't really see him hit the ground very often. So honestly, kind of a one-trick pony. Marcus McGee was kind of able to figure that puzzle out for the first 2 rounds. Into the 3rd round, Jonathan Martinez started laying in those. I think he got him with a good kick at the end of the 2nd round, and you could tell Marcus McGee felt that he was limping back to the stool. Joe Rogan wouldn't shut up about it. 3rd round, he starts landing those kicks again. Huge fumble by Jonathan Martinez. He seemed to be eating those shots on the feet well, especially considering Marcus McGee didn't have any more legs. He doesn't have any push off the ground to really generate any punching power. He's really just throwing arm punches at that moment. So was worried he was just going to start spamming leg kicks to try to get Marcus McGee out of there because he's down 2 rounds. That's his only path to victory, but didn't do that. Not really sure why, but Marcus McGee able to survive that round, ended up winning a unanimous decision. I think he got 2 out of 3 rounds. So good performance by Marcus McGee. 34 years old, so hate to see him take a loss before he really gets into that top 15 and starts to really test himself against much better competition. So look forward to seeing what he gets next. So next up was Mauricio Hoofy versus James Lontop. James Lontop, this guy, tougher than a $2 steak. I tell you what, that kid, he took a beating and just wouldn't stop. He was damn near tiring out Hoofy by the end of the fight. Hoofy's just probably hands are sore from putting him on his face, but very bloodied up. I was thinking that maybe they would look at his eye and stop the fight heading into the 3rd round, but they didn't. Mauricio Hoofy, I'd like to see his past performances make you think that he's just going to run through these guys. I thought he was going to run through this guy, but looked good other than that. Stayed out of trouble. Landed a lot of good punches. Landed a lot of punches that would put a lot of less tough fighters out. So James Lontop, not gonna be a champion or anything, but tough dude, willing to scrap. Love to see him get another chance in the UFC, especially stepping up on short notice in this one. But still kind of a big question mark on Mauricio Hoofy. Should be putting guys out like James Lontop on short notice, but again, like I said in the David Onama fight, he wasn't preparing for this guy either. He looked like the bigger fighter as well, heading into it, 6 foot, 165 pounds. Mauricio Hoofy, 5'11", was signed to compete at 155. So either way, good performance by Mauricio Hoofy. Next one up, Viviane Araujo versus Karine Killer Silva. Karine Silva, confusing performance. Was getting tagged in the 1st round, ended up hurting Viviane Araujo. I think she won the first round. Second round, I forget how she got there. It's been a long night, but she was on top. I think she was in half guard. Went for the most low percentage submission. I think she went from like a darce, tried to roll her over into a darce, but in doing so, you've got to lay on your back and give up top position to try and finish it. Couldn't finish it. Ended up on her back, eating elbows into round 2. Round 3, she just kept laying to her back. I don't get it. She'd barely get the leg caught. She'd fall on her back. She would get up on the fence. She'd fall on her back. Just not very appealing to the judges. 45 seconds into the left in the third round, she's pinned up Araujo against the cage. She's throwing knees. Somehow allows her to hip toss her onto the ground. Ends the fight upside down underneath Araujo. So ends up losing the decision. Awful performance. I think Silva, she's just used to running through competition, finishing them quickly. I think she thought she's going to be able to do the same thing against Araujo, but Araujo, she had some good sweeps on bottom, had a really deep armbar that made me really concerned. Just the busier fighter, winning, had the better cardio, was just winning the scrambles, winning those 50-50 positions in order to get the decision. So good for her. Awful for Silva. I think this win really would have propelled her into title contention, but after a performance like that, she's going to need a few more wins to get back there. So next up, Bo Nickel versus Paul Craig. What a snooze fest. Paul Craig throws nothing but body kicks, threw 0 hands. Bo Nickel scared to death to shoot a takedown. It's like you can shoot a takedown on Paul Craig and be defensively sound and land some ground and pound. You don't have to just sit there and spam right hands, just naked right hands, no setup. Threw some kicks himself, but pretty boring fighter. People started cheering, overrated. Wouldn't say he's overrated. I think that's a legitimate test that he was able to pass. I think he won all 3 rounds, landed the bigger punches. Nobody ever was really hurt or in danger in the fight, but kind of not what we were expecting from a Bo Nickel fight. So either way, 7th pro fight. Hard to hold it against the guy. Paul Craig's been around the game for forever. What is he, 27? Can I do math right now? 27 pro fights right now. Tapped out a lot of the high-level guys, Jamal Hill, Ankalaev. So not somebody you really want to test the waters on the ground with if you don't have to. But either way, Bo Nickel gets another win. Maybe we need to tap the brakes on throwing him to the wolves. I don't know who he called out or if he called out anybody, but we might need to get him a few more fights before we start thinking about putting him in there with top 15 competition. So next fight, Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. This fight was infuriating. Charles Oliveira hurting Michael Chandler earlier, taking him down, controlling him. Slammed him on the ground a few times. I think that first round he took him to the ground, had him in almost like a knee bar position, and then landed in a kind of a heel hook position, sitting on top of him. Just kind of stayed there, didn't take any risks. I thought he was going to try and move out of that position to a more dominant position, but I think he was good with just kind of sitting there and tiring him out. Rest of the fight really just kind of had the crispier striking, was just ahead of Michael Chandler the entire time, shooting his takedowns, getting his takedowns when he needed to, holding on to the back, kind of dominating Michael Chandler for the first 4 rounds. The 5th round, you could tell heading into it, they were shaking out Charles' arms. He was really going for these chokes, spending a lot of energy, holding the body triangle. He looked really tired going into the 5th round. They're shaking his arms on everything, and you could just tell he was kind of deflated. And Michael Chandler ends up landing a pretty good punch and rocked Michael Chandler. And Michael Chandler does what Michael Chandler does. He just went in for the kill, overswung. Charles ended up getting, I think he got on top maybe from there. I can't really remember, but what I do remember is that Michael Chandler landed at least 10 to 15 back of the head shots against Charles Oliveira with the ref standing right there doing nothing. It's the most absurd thing I've ever seen in my life, and if Charles would have lost that fight, I'd be losing my mind right now. But Charles was hurt on the ground, ended up recovering guard, ended up getting the back, ending the fight with being on Chandler's back, and of course Chandler's just got to do some doofus stuff and just slam him on the back because all he wants to do is be entertaining. But Michael Chandler, dirtiest fighter in the UFC. He was fence grabbing, he was hooking the gloves, he was hitting the back of the head. The Poirier fight, he's blowing blood in his face, smeared it on his face, biting his hands. I think he was when Poirier was trying to choke him out. So, not a fan of the guy. Douchey post-fight interview. Called out McGregor. Who else did he call out? Just awkward call out. Not a fan. 38, not beating the top guys. Very frustrating. I'm sure Dominic Cruz was screaming at his screen about Keith Peterson just being an awful ref. But very frustrating. Charles Oliveira dominating that fight. Got a little lazy in the 5th round. Would have been in very little trouble, in my opinion, if he wasn't taking 15 shots to the back of the head. But ended up getting the win. I'd like to see him get the next shot against Oliveira and Sarukian, but we'll see. Very definitive loss to Oliveira, or to Islam Makhachev. You could argue he won rounds 1 and 3 against Arman, but I'd love to see him run it back with either of those guys. It'll probably be Makhachev. I think they can sell that fight. So, and Charles, I mean, he's 35 too, so he's not getting any younger. Give the man a shot. And to the main event, John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. So Stipe, coming into this fight, you would have never thought that he was just going to be a geriatric old man in the octagon. Zero movement. Didn't even look like he could extend his hands on his punches. Would like rush at John and hold his hands up, but wouldn't really ever throw punches. Just eating teep kicks to the stomach, eating leg kicks. Sounded like after the fight, John said that was their strategy, was to start landing body kicks to Stipe to kind of slow him down. But neither of them looked like the greatest in the world. But Stipe just looked awful. That's not the Stipe that but in his last fight fought Francis Ngannou. Not the same gritty fighter that fought Daniel Cormier. So kind of frustrating to see. Was hoping to see a little bit more from him. I know he put on a little weight, but he looked old. Drastic difference between Jim Miller and him in terms of what a 42-year-old can do in the octagon. But yeah, I don't know. Stipe just looked flat-footed. He looked slow. He looked tentative. The entire fight, he was waiting. He wasn't pressuring Jones. He was basically just standing there staring at him, waiting for John to do something, waiting for John to kick him, waiting for John to teep kick him. And then he wasn't even countering off of it. The only punches that he was throwing was when he would kind of run at John, and then John would turn around and scurry along the cage. But John ends up with a spinning back kick to the ribs of Stipe, drops him, lands a few elbows, ref pulls him off. But I guess in a positive light, Jones did say that he would be willing to stick around and fight Aspinall, it sounds like, for the right amount of money. So we'll see if that ever happens. Could be just a way for him to save face and get out of the octagon without having to do another why are you ducking Aspinall interview. But all in all, good card. Didn't do too bad on my picks. I think I went 7-5. Had some risky picks, some big underdog picks. But yeah, good fight card. Unfortunate main event, honestly. But anyways, thanks guys. I'm gonna go to bed. Appreciate it.